Good morning. This week, farmer protests about last year's budget as this year's was delivered.
I know a U-turn was probably exceptionally unlikely, but we were still hoping for some sort of change for this inheritance tax.
More on that later. First, though, dairy farming. According to the DEFRA Farm Business Income Survey for England, dairy farms were doing relatively well in the last financial year. Average incomes more than doubled year on year to around £153,000. Well, the reality at this moment may feel very different. The amounts farmers are paid for milk are falling in the wake of tumbling global dairy prices. The weather, too, has been a headache. Drought in some areas halted grass growth, which had a knock-on for winter fodder supplies, made a little easier by a fortuitously mild autumn. All this week on our sister programme, Farming Today, we looked at the dairy industry. Over the last 30 years, the size of the UK dairy herd has been gradually falling, while average milk yields, that's the number of litres a cow produces, have been steadily increasing. That increase is partly down to using new technology, like on-demand robotic milking machines. Stall Farms in Wiltshire uses robotic milking for their nearly 700-strong Holstein dairy herd, which lives indoors. Marie Lennon has been to meet farm manager Neil Ridgway and his rather quiet cows.
Very rare you'll hear a cow moo around here because they're so chilled out. The cows are chillaxed, sticking their heads out, being very inquisitive, demonstrating I don't want to say natural behaviours, obviously, because it is an indoor environment, but they can express their characters and their social aspects.
Tell me about the robotic systems.
Each cow has an identifying collar. The collar in itself has been collecting rumination data, pedometer data. Pretty much it's the Fitbit for cows. When that cow walks into the robot, it downloads all of that data back to the main PC. They'll only get milked when the system says it's within its thresholds of a perfect milking. We will go in so you can see it from the robot side.
Okay, in we go.
The cow on our left is just starting milking.
And these red robot arms are doing all the movement. They're using sensors to find exactly where they need to go.
So what the arm has just done after the last cow, it's sanitised around any part that's going to touch the next cow, so there's no cross-contamination. You might see the red laser flashing about. 12 robots are doing 2,000 milkings a day. The cow's happily stood there, she's eating what cake she's allowed out of the trough.
This must be one of the biggest dairy operations in the country.
Yeah, on one holding to itself, post the next shed, we will be 16 milking robots. As regards of yields, we've put 1,000 litres per cow per year for the last 4 years on, so we're now producing 12,500 litres a cow.
You've worked in a variety of different systems in different parts of the country and the world. Do you think that inherently in systems like this, the cows are missing out on an aspect of life that they should have, with having space to roam and the fact that there are so many of them together?
There is elements of that, and my last job was organic. I grew up on the Cheshire Dairy Flats, and I've done organic, I've done Channel Islands, I've done rare breed beef. Niche markets are all good and well when there's a market there. When it comes to people in the middle of Birmingham who rely on food as cheap as possible, when you have supermarkets, it's got to be done efficiently.
With milk itself, there are lots of pressures around the price and lots of farmers are seeing their price per litre going down. You're producing here millions of litres.
9.2 million currently.
Right, so...
And the milk price dropped that we faced last week, although it was in low pence.
When you times it by 9.2 million?
It adds up, and a big part of it comes to business resilience.
Neil Ridgway there at Stall Farms in Wiltshire. More on dairy farming on BBC Sounds. Just search for Farming Today. Despite a rise in the number of students taking up agriculture degrees over the last couple of years, not all courses are growing. The University of Nottingham is proposing to close its agriculture and business course at its Sutton Bonington campus. The university says applications for its farming courses have dropped, making them less financially viable. Well, in a moment, we'll hear from the university and from Sir Peter Kendall, the former National Farmers Union president who studied agriculture at Nottingham. First, though, Anna Hill spoke to Herbert Pickford, a fourth-year agriculture student at Nottingham, who started a petition to stop the course being suspended.
I mean, when we heard the news, we were all a bit shocked when we knew we needed to do something. We're over 3,800 signatures now, but from the responses I've got from the university so far, it doesn't really seem to be enough.
What have they said to you about the course, about why they're suspending it?
Primarily, it's the economics of it. Currently, universities all over the country are really struggling at the moment with their finances. So the fact that the agriculture courses aren't viable due to a low number of students has meant they're earmarking it as one of the first things to go.
How many people are on that course at the moment?
So across all 3 years, it's just over 50, I think 53. That's about 20 in third year and second year, but only 13 in first year.
It sounds like it would be actually quite expensive to run.
So it's quite hard to argue against that, but it's really frustrating because the university haven't really advertised it very well within the farming community. Its real USP is the fact that it's a real academic agriculture degree. The amount of research that goes on here, the lecturers you're taught by, it's a very, very high-level academic course.
And what's the mood then amongst the students who are doing agriculture?
A lot of the first years, it's a lot of trepidation, really, because there's not going to be any students coming in underneath them. When they come to be in their final year, there will only be 13 people in their year. What will that be like? They're not going to have the same relationships with younger years within agriculture. They're not going to have the same vibrant agriculture society we have at the minute. And looking at their teaching experience, will the lecturers stay on?
Agriculture student Herbert Pickford. Sir Peter Kendall is a former NFU president and honorary professor at the University of Nottingham, where he studied agriculture. Anna asked him if closing agriculture courses there was the right thing to do.
And these courses bring everything together. Yes, you could look at some vet science or animal science somewhere, or a bit of husbandry or nutrition, but the challenges facing the world today of feeding what's forecast to be 10 billion or the 70 million plus in the UK is one of the biggest challenges facing mankind. This is when we need great scientists, great trained farmers and farm business managers. And to me, it's just a real tragedy if this actually goes through.
What happens then if this closes? How does that impact farming as a whole? Because we're not talking about a really large number of people here, are we?
There is a bit of a time at the moment where, because some of the mood around the industry is quite downbeat, that we send that message externally as well. But these are the courses that is training our farmers and practitioners for the future. So, yeah, you said if it's not a massive number of students, it's not going to be critical here and now, but we're losing critical capacity. And that's the thing that's a real shame. And I went to Nottingham back in the end of the 70s, early 80s, massively influential in my career. And I just want to make sure that before they make this decision, they know they've understood all the implications of it.
Sir Peter Kendall. Professor Zoe Wilson is Pro-Vice-Chancellor for the Faculty of Science at Nottingham University. She told me the courses just aren't viable and so have been suspended.
The decisions that we've made regarding course suspensions are really difficult ones to make. But basically, we feel that we've got no choice because the numbers of students on these programmes are incredibly small and they're not financially viable.
Well, students say that's partly because the course wasn't advertised widely enough, particularly within the farming community. And we are seeing, generally, more people interested in studying agriculture.
The challenge is that the numbers are really still quite small. We have done an investigation into how many students are applying to do straight agriculture degree programmes, and actually it's not that high at the sort of level that we would be looking. It's quite an academically focused course in this area, so that again does constrain in terms of the tariff that is required for that programme. So we are still reviewing this. The council decision was to look into whether these courses should be closed. Say they're suspended at the moment. There will be a full analysis of that. There's also the fact that closing courses is actually part of general university activity as business as usual. What we will be doing is looking to see whether there are other areas of development where a course that is more sustainable could be developed, because we're not wanting to stop our activity in agriculture. We recognise the real importance of this, both for food security, for the local community, as well as the national and the global one.
Well, this is the point that Sir Peter Candle was making, that actually it is, in his view, important to study sort of straight agriculture. And there is a strategic importance, he says, of that, particularly given concerns about food security and climate change.
So we would say fully recognise the importance of the discipline, but we aren't managing to recruit students to do this as a straight option, I think, and that's the difficulty, that the market isn't there. What we want to be able to do is to flex with some of the other courses that we run to offer the opportunities to get that experience of agriculture.
Professor Zoe Wilson. Cases of bird flu are still on the rise across the country, with outbreaks now in all 4 nations of the UK, and housing orders for England, Wales and Northern Ireland are in place, meaning all poultry has to be inside if the flock totals more than 50 birds. BBC Wales Environment correspondent Stefan Messenger has been listening to the concerns of poultry farmers at the Royal Welsh Winter Fair in Builth Wells.
Usually there'd be chickens running all over Alison Kennedy's farmyard and fields in the Llanvi Valley north of Bridgend. But here, as across Wales, they're having to be kept inside. It's to protect them from a highly infectious strain of avian flu.
We've had to put biosecurity measures in place as regards to the birds. We've had to keep them in. We've had to limit who can go in the sheds. It's a lot more harder, don't get me wrong, but if it's protecting the birds, it's what we got to do.
So the turkeys are in lockdown at the moment.
In Tremaine, Ceredigion, Kate Postance is rearing 500 turkeys ready for Christmas.
It would break my heart to have to tell our customers, I'm really sorry, we don't have a turkey for you. It's just unfortunate that this is carried by wild birds. Seagulls were so close to the coast. We've not been to the beach all summer because we knew it was there or potentially there. If any of our birds contracted it, I don't see a way back from us, because it would just be financially and emotionally, I think, too draining.
Since October the 1st, the start of a new bird flu season, there have been 50 cases recorded across the UK, including 7 in Wales. Industry leaders warn it could be one of the worst years yet for outbreaks of the disease, with devastating consequences for the affected farms.
I cannot overemphasise the concern out there.
David Jarrett is NFU Cymru's National Food and Farming Advisor.
More than anything, it's the random nature of the disease. You don't know where it'll turn up next. We'd like the results published earlier, and then if you get that information, that would be a huge benefit for other poultry producers.
Affected sites so far include a poultry unit with 31,000 turkeys near Milford Haven in Pembrokeshire, and another with 32,000 egg-laying hens near Cynnoed in Denbighshire. A site with 28,000 broiler chickens reared for meat was hit near Welshpool in Powys, while smaller farms and so-called backyard flocks have also been affected. Wales's chief vet says he and the Welsh Government are working closely with the industry, and farmers should do everything they can to protect their birds.
Richard Irvine, Chief Veterinary Officer for Wales. So unfortunately this year we've seen a number of cases of bird flu in Wales, but also in other parts of Great Britain. And we're seeing an uptick in those cases a little bit earlier than last year, and that naturally is a concern. The housing order has now come into force.
Longer term, is there a way out of this, or is it just something farms are going to have to get used to every year?
There are patterns that change year on year with regard to bird flu. But alongside that, one of the pieces of work that we're doing on a UK basis is the UK Vaccine Task Force for avian influenza. So that's ongoing work. That UK Vaccine Task Force published a report early this summer looking at the direction of travel with the possibility of vaccination being used for bird flu. So that's one option that may come to the fore in the future. The here and now, however, is that we are seeing an uptick in bird flu cases, and consequently for all poultry keepers, whatever your type of flock, whatever your size of flock, to do everything you can to protect your birds through the best possible hygiene and biosecurity measures.
That report from BBC Wales Environment correspondent Stefan Messenger. Farmers were in London again this week, using this year's budget day to continue protests about the re-imposition of inheritance tax on farming and business assets of more than £1 million, something announced in last year's budget. Many of them had been planning to take part in a tractor protest, but less than 24 hours before it was due to start, the Metropolitan Police told the organisers that no agricultural vehicles could be brought to the event. That caused both anger and confusion, and hundreds of tractors did arrive in London. One of the protest organisers, farmer Colin Rayner, told me the police's decision was a total surprise and wrong.
We had it all planned, all organised, agreed with the Metropolitan Police. The committee had a meeting with the police on Zoom at 3 p.m. yesterday afternoon and cancelled it and said we couldn't park in Whitehall, and if we parked in Whitehall we'd be arrested and carted off to jail.
To be fair, the Met Police will point out they didn't stop the protest. They just said, please don't bring tractors because of the impact it has on emergency services and Londoners going about their day.
I have to beg to differ because they have protests in London every weekend by various...
Not with tractors.
But we came here last time and the Metropolitan Police said it was the best protest that they've ever seen, best well behaved, and the farmers even cleaned up after themselves. And what we've got today is chaos.
There are lots of tractors around Trafalgar Square. I've just walked down. We've got reports of some people being arrested because they won't move their tractors. But it was clear that tractors couldn't be brought this time.
It's quite clear that you couldn't park in Whitehall. And our original plan was to drive up here, do a circuit of Westminster and go home. But when we got here, the police parked us up on Trafalgar Square and told us to go and walk to the Mall for the protests.
Why were you protesting in the first place? Because we had Angela Eagle on Farming Today last week and she said she understands people's anger, but we are where we are, time to move on.
Our family have farmed for a very long time. We can't lose it.
But you won't. You have plenty of time. 7 years you've got to gift that to your offspring.
Unfortunately, if you make that 7 years, and I've dealt with my parents' deaths and the tax we had to pay then, and that was crippling. And when my grandparents died in the 60s, my parents were poor for 20 years, paying the death duties and selling houses and selling property. And we went without in the 60s and 70s. I don't want my children to suffer that.
But they won't. If you get yourself organised, you've got 7 years to gift bits away to get under the threshold, so you won't be affected by this at all.
That's on the thing that I can live 7 years and whether my children want to take it on. It's not only the inheritance tax, it's every other tax. They don't want us to farm, and for some reason we're not liked by this government.
The government would deny that, obviously, and they will say this is a fair tax, and a lot of people in today's budget will no doubt be affected by paying more tax in one way or another. Why should a farmer be any different?
We wouldn't object so much if the tax was spent wisely. When we see billions of pounds going overseas...
But that's a completely different argument, isn't it, about how tax is spent?
No.
You are, by any stretch of anyone's imagination, sitting on millions of pounds worth of land in many cases on farms. So why shouldn't you pay tax?
Well, it would mean the split up of our farm, unfortunately. And then it would become uneconomic. And the tax burden for the next generation would be too great. If you see who is protesting today, it's mainly under 30-year-old boys and girls who are up here worried about their future. And we've looked after the country, all of us, for hundreds of years and done a really good job. And I just think the government needs to rethink and give us time. And there's other ways. The NFU have come up with other ways they can tax us, which are fair. I don't think it's fair.
Colin Rayner. The Metropolitan Police refused our request for an interview, but in a statement said, This decision was taken due to the serious disruption they, tractors, may cause to the local area, including businesses, emergency services and Londoners going about their day. They said that those in tractors were advised to leave and that the majority listened to officers and complied, but that several arrests were made. Well, protesting farmers on foot were guided to an area opposite the gates to Downing Street, where a few hundred gathered and listened to the Chancellor. There was just one mention of inheritance tax in Rachel Reeves' speech.
I reformed inheritance tax on agricultural and business assets. And this year, I am aligning those reforms with wider inheritance tax rules by allowing the transfer of the 100% relief allowance between spouses, balancing the taxation of these valuable assets with the realities of family life.
That didn't impress those listening farmers or the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
She should be on the side of people who get up and go to work, people who take a risk to start a company, people working all hours to keep their business afloat. She should be on the side of the farmer, trying to hand something over to the next generation.
Outside the gates to Downing Street, protesting farmers had hoped for a lot more from the Chancellor.
That's a small back down, really, but it's still nowhere near enough, not for the amount of money. With the seasons and the way the harvests are at the moment and our returns, there's just no way we can run to it. So it's tinkering. She needs to up the limit if she's going to do anything.
Given the huge discrepancy between the capital value of property and its productive value, whether it's you or you and your spouse or you and anybody else, you can't pay it.
Have you been following the budget as you stand here outside Downing Street?
I know a U-turn was probably exceptionally unlikely, but we were still hoping for some sort of change on at least ring-fencing the older generation that haven't had time to plan for this inheritance tax. The government not bending any of the policy at all is disgusting.
Well, the president of the National Farmers Union, Tom Bradshaw, told me the budget was disappointing.
Obviously, there's been a small amendment within today's budget on the inheritance tax proposals, which means that the spousal allowance can be transferred. And that is backdated to enable those that have already lost a spouse to make use of that spousal allowance. So they will be eligible for up to £2 million once you bring in that allowance. But it's a really, really small change, Charlotte. It does not remove the human pressure, which is so intolerable for that older element of our community and those that are terminally ill. It's still an evil policy which has them trapped with no way to plan. And we will continue to fight the policy.
Well, surely what this does in practice is raise the threshold for people who have a spouse because it allows you to transfer that allowance.
No, because if your spouse was alive, then you already had, between you both had the £1 million allowance. So what it's meant is that in the tragic circumstances of an early death, where your children may not be old enough to inherit, you don't have to pass that down to the next generation at an inappropriate stage. So it makes it far more possible to plan when it is right to pass that down. There was an element here for those that had already lost a spouse where they weren't going to have access to that £1 million that their spouse would have had. It now means that they will be able to access that. So it's a change which is welcome. It's also recognition that the policy isn't correct, which again we've been pushing for over a year now.
The government has argued consistently since last year's budget that this is a fair tax and that it will go ahead. Is it time to accept that and move on, as the Farming Minister Angela Eagle put it on this programme last week?
We cannot move on, Charlotte, while there is that sector of our community that don't have any ability to plan because they don't expect to live for very long beyond April next year. While they are still trapped within this policy, we are absolutely focused now on how we can amend the finance bill to try and mitigate the impact on those that are trapped within this pernicious tax. And that is what we'll be doing over the next few weeks.
I just want to move on to some of the other things that were mentioned. Increase in the national minimum wage and indeed the living wage, free apprenticeships for the under 25s. Both of those will have an effect, won't they, on some farming businesses?
The free apprenticeships one is actually good news. The agricultural industry should be very well placed to provide apprenticeships and to draw people in that maybe want to leave school at an earlier age. So that is something that we will welcome. On the national living wage, that is another inflationary pressure within our food system. And the moment the government are desperate to try and mitigate food price inflation, well, that national living wage increasing 4.1% will drive inflation through the whole system. And that will end up coming through to the retail shelf because our members cannot absorb those cost increases. It must go up the supply chain.
President of the National Farmers Union, Tom Bradshaw. And that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Beatrice Fenton. And Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.